I'm Michael Bungay-Stenya. This is Change Signal. This is the podcast where we cut through the blather, the BS, and the noise to find the good stuff that works in change. If you are a transformational leader and you're looking to really own what it means to become a change maker, this is the perfect podcast for you. I think one of the key insights I've had from doing Change Signal so far is that almost job number one for somebody on a change team is to make everybody else part of that change team. You just can't be doing it all by yourself. You're trying to create agency so that people figure out that change is not being done to them. It's something they get to do and to lead themselves. And I've been searching for wisdom on this, and I found Alex Budak. Now, Alex is faculty member at UC Berkeley's business school. He's been a social entrepreneur. He's also author of Becoming a Changemaker, a book I loved. He has a lot to say about just what it takes to help others step into the role of being a change maker, and we're going to get into it. Alex, welcome.
Michael, I'm happy and delighted to be here.
I'm happy and delighted as well. Let me start with me as an individual. Like, if I'm trying to increase my own capacity to be a change maker, where do I start? What do I need to unlearn and learn?
So the first thing is we've got to start giving ourselves permission. Mm-hmm. I know it sounds easy to say on a podcast, but I think it's actually a bit deeper than it sounds.
Yeah.
That at Berkeley, I get the privilege of teaching everywhere from 18-year-old freshmen all the way to senior executives. And I find that so often people are sort of waiting for this moment where someone comes along, like taps you on the shoulder and goes, okay, you're a leader. You're a vice president now, whatever that title is.
Blessed you. Yeah.
Congrats, you got it. But the truth is, if you're waiting for that moment, you're going to be waiting a really long time. And so that first and most powerful moment, I think, is that cognitive switch to, instead of relying on someone else for that permission, to actually take it upon yourself.
Yeah.
And Hermione Ibarra, I'm a big fan of her work. And she's done great research looking at sort of what are the most important leadership competencies today. Came up with a list of like 7 or 8. What I love is that all but maybe one are things you don't need permission for, right? It's things like collaborating well, it's influencing well, it's handling ambiguity. Those are all things that don't require a title or authority. Those are things we actually find internally, not easily, right? We need to do that self-work, but those are things that we can actually find control over.
So what is the self-work we do that opens up the courage and the, I guess, entitlement in the best possible way to say, actually, I'm actually going to claim this?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it starts with our values work. So understanding, what do you actually value? And again, these things sound simple, but you'd be amazed how many leaders, how many folks haven't actually taken the time to say, what do I value? Or they say, look, I value these 12 things. Well, if you value 12 things, you don't really value anything.
Yeah.
What are the things that you'll really like go out on a limb for? What are things that you're living for? And having a couple of those core values that animate the work that you do, I think that's so important.
I love that you're saying that. But how did you come to find your values? How did you come to kind of name them and claim them?
So again, just to bring in some other folks' work that I appreciate. So Brene Brown, many of your listeners probably know Brene Brown. She says that her job is to sort of collect all these different data points and bring them into this quilt, this tapestry that she weaves. And that's the way I like thinking about it too, is that I think part of our job is just introduce ourselves to as many different stimuli, as many different experiences as possible.
I love that.
And when you do, go in with sort of an open mind. What triggers you? What's something that maybe uniquely makes you more upset than other people? That's sometimes a signal.
Right.
What's a thing that you feel lit up when it happens? What's the thing you keep coming back to? And putting yourself in unfamiliar, unusual situations and just being this sort of neutral observer. We're fascinating people. Individuals, humans are fascinating. And to bring a bit of that to ourselves, I think, is a wonderful lens.
You can say no to this question, but do you have values that you'd be willing to share with us? And I'm curious to know where you found them.
Well, one of my favorite lessons from your podcast is your conversation with Vanessa Bonds. I'd actually assign it in one of my classes at Berkeley. But she says that when you ask someone for something, you try to influence, you also give them the way out, the words to say no to. And so even if you give me those words, I'm very happy to share my thoughts. So, yeah, my core values. So it's courage and possibility.
Nice.
Possibility, this belief that just because things are one way, they could be different. And to go into each conversation, each moment, each situation, imagining not just what is, but what could be. And then on the courage front, it's that I'm at my best when I'm courageous. And that doesn't mean not feeling fear. It just means that I'm willing to do whatever those hard things are, that so much of life happens on that other side of courage. And so those are the two that I try to lean into the most.
Love those. For me, articulating values, I find it more helpful if I can move beyond a single word to make it feel a bit more unique and distinct and personal and sometimes somatic. So I have a value that is around courage as well. My language for it is naked on stage, because when I was in law school, which was mostly a disaster because I'm a terrible law student, but the thing I loved doing was the law review, which is this kind of skit comedy thing, Saturday Night Live or the Monty Python, kind of that sort of aspiration. And one of the sketches myself and a friend did was something called synchronized nude male modeling, which involved, I know, we're all grateful YouTube didn't exist back then. But me and a friend stepped naked onto stage and went through this kind of mock synchronized swimming kind of routine. And I just remember that moment on the wings, about to step into the spotlight for the first time, taking off the dressing gown, just what that felt like. And that grounds me in a moment of courage in a way that helps me connect to that value.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And courage itself can sound a bit empty or easy to say, yes or no binary. And so I actually think about courage across 6 different dimensions. So I think about courage when we say, hey, be more courageous. That doesn't actually work for most people.
Right.
I think we actually need to think about it in 6 different types. So we've got moral courage, physical courage, social courage, intellectual, emotional courage, and creative courage. It's not just about courage for its own sake. It's what type of courage do I need here? And I guess maybe there's a 7th, which is naked courage. But in my writing, in my academic writing, I haven't put that one in there yet.
Well, I'm always adding value, Alex. That's the way I roll. I am curious to know how you access your courage, or maybe how you, maybe this is related, increase the capacity for courage for you.
Some of the classic philosophical takes on moral courage says that you have to have a value and pain you're willing to endure in service of that value.
Right.
And so while it sounds dramatic, I do think that's where it has to start, is something bigger than yourself. That if it's only about money or status or some of those things, that probably isn't enough to sustain your courage. For me personally, I shared my top 2 values, but if I were to share a third, that third would be contribution. And so I think often it's in that sense of contribution that I find my courage, that I don't want to be courageous just for my own sake. It's for someone else or a larger movement or a greater meaning.
Right.
And that's usually what helps me unlock my sense of courage. It's taking a risk, but a risk in service of something greater.
So I asked you where we start to become a change maker, and you said, well, look, it's giving yourself permission. You are allowed to step up, take the baton, wave the flag, bang the drum, be in the arena, and connecting that to values. If I've granted myself permission, if I've found a way to draw on whatever my values might be that would enable me to take that first step forward, what next?
So we run the risk when we use the word changemaker that it feels singular or individual. And I'd like at the top to make sure we think about changemaking as a team sport. They actually need all kinds of folks. I'm coming to you from the Silicon Valley Bay Area, where we tend to do this thing called heropreneurship.
Yes.
We put that lone innovator up on a pedestal. But I'm actually much more interested in the way that teams of changemakers come together. And so once you've given yourself that permission, then I think the next question is to say, who else cares about this? Who else is going to join me in this? And how do I bring out the best alongside them?
Well, look, I'm so delighted you've gone here. And this is one of the things I'm most interested to talk to you about, because when I started in Change 30 years ago, it was like the change team is going to be the heroic force that makes the change happen in the organization. My thinking's really shifted to that, going, how do we unlock the courage and capacity of everyone through an organization to be the forces of change in that organization? How do I find my people? Let me start there.
Yeah, I'm much more interested in sort of fluid teams. And so I agree that the older model used to be, okay, this is our innovation team. This is the group that goes off and they do the innovation, they do the change, and they come back.
Yeah.
And I'm actually much more interested in how teams emerge somewhat more organically, more dynamically. I love the work done by Damon Centola at University of Pennsylvania.
Damon Centola's book is terrific, by the way. It's called Change, How to Make Big Things Happen.
Yeah, an expert on change.
Yeah.
This idea that in a group, in order to have a social norm take hold, only about 25% of people need to be on board with that new norm. And so when you think about it that way, and again, if you were to ask me before reading his work, I would have said at least 50%. I probably would have been clever, said 51%.
Right.
But when we think about 25%, it actually makes it so much more accessible. And so in some of the groups that I've worked with, I really love this idea of thinking about, okay, let's get a quarter of people on board. And then we think, okay, maybe we bring on some senior folks, maybe it's some more junior folks, maybe it's people that are peers, but in a different office of mine. And we can kind of think creatively to find who that group of folks is.
Yes.
Usually what happens is you start off with the people that are closest to you.
That's good.
But then it's how do you turn those folks into be your champions? And when you do that, you empower them. You lose a little bit of control, lose a little bit of the vision perhaps. But by empowering those around you, those that feel some buy-in, some stake in it, that's where you started expanding that circle out a little bit. And we often find in the entrepreneurial world that sometimes people hold too close to that vision, too tense to their core idea without inviting people in. And so I encourage you to think about who are those people that will be your early champions.
Teach me how I can do a better job at holding the thing lightly. I love this idea that you're holding on too tight, being too precious about the purity of the idea, and how often the process of change, whether that's social change out in the world or change within an organization, is a mucky, compromised, diluted experience, especially if it's working. So how do you increase capacity to sit with the compromise and the ambiguity of this?
Well, I've got some bad news for you, is you're asking the wrong person, because that is one of my fatal flaws when it comes to change. That's the thing that I really struggle with, to be honest, is holding on to things too tightly because I care so much because it's so values driven. And so I share this as someone who's not an expert in it and someone who actually struggles with this. But what I found to be helpful is to think about that larger goal, that larger mission again, and recognizing we just can't do things on our own. But then I guess to kind of bridge things, right? To sort of hold things lightly while letting things in is to think about like, what are your non-negotiables? A framework that I use sometimes is being clear on your why, flexible on your how. And so you as a leader, you might have a thing or two you say, we will not compromise on. We will not compromise on climate efficiency. We will not compromise on gender equality. We will not compromise on getting into 5 states in the next year, whatever those things are.
Yeah.
But then on the how, you loosen control a little bit. And again, I say this as someone that I'm not necessarily good at this, but that's what I found to be helpful for me, at least, in making sure, okay, a couple of things I really stand for, those have to continue on. But maybe that how actually invites others to be more creative than I could be.
You'll find Alex at his website, alexbudak.com. So ALEXBUDAK.com. He's got a Substack, alexbudak.substack.com. And he's also on LinkedIn. His book, Becoming a Changemaker, which I can really recommend, is in all the usual places. One of the paradoxes I wrestle with in change is I'm trying to create agency in others. I mean, I'm delighted that I only need to do it for 25% of the organization and not 51% or more. But, 25% of a 10,000 person organization is still 2,500 people. It's a lot of people. And we started with this insight around permission. You have permission to step into this. I'm desperate for more people to become change makers, to step into it. And whilst I might be able to influence myself and influence perhaps those in my near proximity, I just don't quite know how to scale agency. All I know is me going, I'm giving you agency, is a contradictory statement in itself. So do you have any guidance on what it takes to be able to invite bigger numbers of people in so that they join the fray?
Yeah, so I guarantee it's not based off of having the perfectly crafted Slack message or the all hands announcement, right? Those things don't actually work.
I actually think change comms still matters these days. I'm also curious to know just what that means in 2026 and beyond, what form that takes. It may not be the all hands announcement anymore.
So I think what people are looking for, especially in my work, the people I work with that have maybe been at an organization for 30 years, they just don't feel that sense of agency.
Yeah.
Those words are going to ring really hollow.
Yeah.
And so I think where you need to go is actually around the culture and around what norms, what behaviors are rewarded. It's easy to say, hey, we want you to have a sense of agency. But the question for you as a leader is, okay, so someone comes to you and they say, I really disagree with that thing that you decided on. I don't think that's the right call. And actually, here's what I would do. Do you shut them down? Do you not listen to them? Or do you actually invite them in? And again, it sounds easy perhaps, but it's harder when we're triggered, when someone challenges us, or maybe their sense of agency is a little different from the agency we want them to have. That's not how it works. And so I think a lot of it happens in that moment where you feel that friction.
Yeah.
And so it's being able to slow down a little bit and to see, okay, maybe there's some value in this, having some of that humility to say, maybe they have a perspective that I don't have.
Yeah. It reminds me of that quote, one of the kind of old school movie directors going, I don't want to have yes men around me, even if it costs them their job. And I'm like, that's the challenge. Yeah. So one of the things I loved about the book is when you talked about what it means to be a networked leader. So I understand it's like a counterpoint to being the traditional hero CEO model of leadership. In other words, the most effective modern leaders don't see themselves as solo protagonists. They see themselves as nodes in a web of relationships, mobilizing others rather than commanding them. And to help people understand it, to kind of get the embodied sensation of what that means, you actually set up 4 different pairs. I think of them as this, not that pairs. I love that as a model. You've got trust, not control. You've got humility, not brand, so kind of ego-based. You've got node, not hub. And you've got mission, not organization. Now, we could go deep on any one of those, but I'm going to double click on the node, not hub, because I think that's particularly a really powerful unlock for change leaders. So tell me what you mean.
Good pick. That's my favorite of the 4 as well. So happy to speak to that. Yeah. And this is actually the work of Janeway Skillern and some of her colleagues. They wrote about this in Stanford's Social Innovation Review called The Most Impactful Leaders You've Never Heard of. So credit to them for their work. And so, yeah, when they talk about being a node, not a hub, that's where you want to be. It goes back to this idea of when you give yourself that title of Changemaker, the risk is that you think you have to do it all yourself and all the rewards will come to you. And so if we think in terms of systems, the hub is where everything is coming off of you. You are everything to the organization. Whereas the node is, how do I fit into this larger system?
Right.
I'll give just one example from the early days of my sort of social entrepreneurship journey, where I used to judge myself based on how many decisions could I be making? How often did my team come to me and how often did I give them advice and answer? Right. So, hey, Alex, what do you think about this tweet? Great, go for it. Hey, what do you think about this? Great, go for it. And I was like, wow, look how important I am. I'm a great leader.
Yeah.
But what I realized is that we had really become like this merry-go-round. So there's all this activity happening,
right.
But I was sort of this pole in the middle, all this stuff swirling around me. So all this activity is happening, but we were planted firmly in place. We weren't going anywhere. I had made myself too central to the organization. Mm-hmm. My notion of a leader was that I had to make all those decisions be central. But actually where our growth started happening was when I stepped back and I made the shift that instead of judging myself based on how many decisions could I make myself, instead, how many decisions could I not make? How many decisions could others make? Of course, grounded in our vision and in our values, that clear on the why, flexible on the how.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you actually how wonderful it is to just let other people tweet, to not have to do those tweets myself. And freed me up, but also more importantly, freed up our organization as well. And so I became more of a node, right? Just part of this organization. Yeah, sure, maybe I'm the co-founder, but we're all in this together versus being a hub where I'm too central.
Got it. I'm also interested in knowing if I'm trying to become a node, not a hub, I want to be able to give people permission to do the things. You don't have to run the tweet past me and the like. But I don't want to give them complete freedom to do anything and everything they want to do any way that they want to do it. That just feels like that probably is anarchy. Do you have any guidance on how to set clear boundaries, which are somehow principled rather than micromanagely specific?
Yeah. So the visual analogy is to draw someone a box and you give them the box and say, these are sort of the constraints. And then you get to have full agency within that box.
Oh,
and so they say, look, you cannot go to the CEO by yourself. I'm going to go with you. But short of that, you can kind of create the plan that you want.
Really helpful.
And then the second one, which is a bit jargony, kind of behavioral economics, but it's this idea of protecting downside risk. So before you give something out, you think, what's the worst case scenario that could happen? And then you mitigate against that proactively, right? So maybe you say the worst case scenario is I tell someone to plan this event and they don't plan anything or they plan it terribly. Well, okay, so instead of giving them the deadline of 24 hours before the event, you say, you need to have this plan 2 weeks in advance. And that way, if they don't, well, okay, you could scramble. You could do it in 2 weeks yourself if you had to. And so those are two ways you can sort of loosen control without letting go of control.
That's both great. Alex, I'm wondering, what do you know now that you didn't know 3 years ago around change and how change works?
Probably the main critique that the book gets is that sometimes it comes off, or people perceive it as being overly optimistic or edging on idealism.
Yeah.
And I think this is another one of those paradoxes we need to hold, that when leading change, often find that we have sort of two sides of the spectrum. You have the idealist who is susceptible to sort of toxic positivity or just things will work out, it's fine. But on the other hand, we've sort of glorified the person who's maybe the cynic who says all the reasons this thing will never work. And what I've come to believe in my change work is we actually need both.
Yeah.
It's something I call grounded idealism.
Nice.
That it's crucial as a change maker that you don't lose that sense of hope. And when we say hope, I don't mean hope in this sort of light, easy way. I mean it in the way that author Rebecca Solnit says. She says, hope isn't this lottery ticket that you clutch. It's an axe you use to break down doors in case of an emergency. That's how I think about hope.
That's great.
So it's this powerful sense of hope, this belief that tomorrow could be better than today,
Yeah.
that we can make sure that it is. And if you don't have that sense of hope or idealism, what's the point? Where are we? Why are we here? But then at the same time, to not just be stuck in that idealism, that when we think about leading change is really hard. And we need to value those lived experiences where people have been disappointed, where they've been let down, where their idealism was dashed, where people are smart enough to see the systemic barriers we're facing and why change can't work. But I think what I would encourage folks to do is not go to either end of that spectrum, but instead find some purpose, some meaning, this idea of grounded idealism.
That's right.
To be idealistic, to be hopeful, and also recognize the real challenges.
When things get hard, then let's face it, they do as a transformational leader. I'd love to be able to keep coming back to Alex's final words. Recognize the real challenges. So be grounded in reality, but also be idealistic and hopeful. Hold lightness. I love the paradox. Be grounded, be light. I also love your support for this pod, so thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, the best thing you could do is to recommend it to a colleague. The second best thing, give it a review somewhere. The third best thing, well, how about you listen to next week's episode? I'm sure it's going to be a banger. Meantime, I'm glad you're here. Thanks for doing the work.